This is from my new collection, which is on the table over there, called This is the Likeness. Talini Green, after Jennifer Boyden. No one thing could have prepared me for the prairie grasses of northern Montana. We arrived in late summer to the homestead. A trailer door swung open in welcome. Blueprints and the religion of radiant heat warm the after-dinner conversation as he talks us through the floor plans, walks us across the cement pad, imagines with us the walls, the stairs, the windows. All around us, nothing but grass. The broad green swale levels the landscape forever. So I startled to hear birdsong, to find birds nesting at my feet. This is a world without trees, not a single limb. Nothing to look up to but blue. I am polite, but when we leave, I know. Leaves for me, not blades. My heart goes green and leafy. Any of you been up to Montana prairies? It's other. I do have a few dog poems in here. My dog's not with me anymore, but I find I understand more and more, and I found this when I read about your new book, Joan, that our relationships with animals are profound and much more than we know. Windbreak. The dog knows the way to go. A narrow path burnished to cracked clay wanders through thistle and dried grasses. I lean into the wind. We meet at the crest in a copse of fir, follow the trail to the center, where history hangs in the dead wood, drift of moss and lichen. I stand in the quiet where the wind doesn't reach, walk beneath the gray skirts of the old ones. Lace of lichen like hair hangs on bone, branches layered in stubs up the trunk. Scars record a reckless sapling or maybe a life well lived. How long have they stood here, old ones in a huddle, shielded by the youngers? From down here at the foot, the green crown waving is just an idea. I'm a little ahead of myself. We're not exactly in late winter, but we will imagine. Late winter disquiet. Trash bins pace themselves on Mondays, hug the curb on the lip of going on. An interval of heather backs them, crowds in its violet way the sidewalk, where children scramble, old folk amble, only skinny people can pass. Dried stalks of fuchsia, yarrow, and sage provide no nectar for a hummingbird, who lights and lights and lights, then darts away. Only the kale, an oasis of miniature palms, rises green on tall, thick stems, ruffled leaves spreading cover over weeds weary of the cold and haze. A yellow lab, unleashed, peers around the hedge, scans the yard of yapping dogs across the road, then resumes his patrol. I watch as his nose leads him down the block to leave his scent around the corner. So much below ground goes unseen. Together we hold space and wait. Start at the upper pond after Samuel Green. Watch the egret pace the backs of cows in broad daylight. Stay until the dark falls like a moth-eaten curtain, stars poking through from the other side. See the nick in the lower crescent of the moon. No bead of blood on my sleeve can explain. Salmon swimming upstream for something final and primal. I haven't told you about the dead, how their stories wander in spirals, grow lighter as they go higher, reshape the past around fire, cast a line into the waters of your future, how things fit together like some secret guarded by the crescent waxing gibbous. As the great blue heron swoops low over the creek, you see, before the dog can startle, a flash of the crest, the broad span of open wings. I have a couple pieces here from my time in Alaska. I lived up there about 25 years until the dark started to slow my brain way down. But I still think of it very fondly. For any of you who have friends or relatives up there, you're probably familiar with the idea of 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. Head up to the North Slope for 2 weeks and then come home for 2 weeks, because it's too much of a haul to go back and forth more often than that. Long stint in King Salmon. He called every day at the end of his 14-hour shift, while his dinner thawed in the microwave or charred in the skillet. Sometimes he talked while he ate, which was one of his particular talents, and she would hear an occasional crunch or slurp, distorted over the distance as if to add extra consonants or muffle others. Sometimes the phone died, and she would have to wait, would have to guess whether he was going to call right back, or maybe take a shower first, or finish his Salisbury steak. Was he snapping the rim off another can of Coke? Was he washing his dishes? She liked to hear his voice just before his head hit the pillow, his longing as he began to relax for all that was not work. To hear him sigh deeply brought him closer to her, as if his pillow nudged hers, as if her long day ran parallel to his in a kind of tandem. So much relied upon his auditory cues, his inflections, which were hard to read through the telephone's hardware. So she would imagine them, translating the clicks and whines and pauses like dolphin sonar, hoping to close the distance between them. Sometimes she knew, when his work was all-consuming and his mind couldn't leave the map of inventory of wires and outlets, junction boxes and flex conduit, that he sorted code against blueprints in his dreams. From Knick Arms to Potter's Marsh. Picture a window wide enough, south-facing and high, sunrise behind the Chugach Range, sunset behind Mount Augustine, rise and decline measured by familiar geographies, sometimes so specific you can name the day. Remember February 21st, when the sun set like a dragon on fire behind the rugged contour of our sleeping volcano. 365 days, such a marvel will return again. We will have tea out of your grandmother's china, pistachios by the brass spoonful, conversations sure as the flood and the scudding of ice above the mud flats. Girl in the Woods. Girl in the woods, hair wild with twigs, could be eating dirt or sucking roots, her skin the color of bark. I expect she may have grown, at least in knowledge, living with the leaves and bones of trees for so long, trace of her in the ash, trunk sheathed in lichen, branches festive with clumps of moss, a scattering of red leaves like torn ribbons, and in the boughs of the larch a light snow of reindeer lichen like lace. Smell of the woods follows me, from any tree standing close. She is in my breath, my lungs, the sap of her my blood. She breathes me in. Stepping into the wild. We have confined Glory Bower to the far side of the drive. Rigid cement at least slows the errant runners, a skittish kind of taming, the blueberries at risk. Cucumbers clamber over the sides of their bed, fill the space between with lush leaf and vine. The benign fruit grows fat or lopsided, pale yellow or deep green, as it pleases. Tomatoes, chocolate, heirloom, and cherry, grown taller than me, thrive in their modest crib. Densely leaved and fruited, the yellow toms win the prize for highest yield. At season's end, they spill over the borders, onto the mulch, into the lawn, and when I go to pick a bowl full, sliding my arm into that fragrant tomato jungle, I reach into the wild part of myself. Hair disheveled, cloaked in green, yellow toms adorn my earlobes like gems. button close my green jerkin. Another dog poem. We sit and we walk. My dog licks her paw as we sit on the sofa, her hip warming mine. She turns belly up for a rub, an offering of submission I take as affection. She submits so that I will play. She's teaching me many things, like the way she explores the neighborhood's margins, edges of manicured lawns, and walkways or the intrigue of thistle and tall grasses bordering the meadow. She wanders nose deep, tongue-licking dew in long strokes. She tracks the heady sense of her dog community, lifts her nose and stands on two legs like a prairie dog to scan for a four-legged silhouette. Longing for solid flesh and fur, she settles for traces in grasses, shows me how rich the edges can be. This is a called Self-Portrait after Adam Zagievsky. Between my dog, the dishes, and the computer, half my day passes. One day it will be half a century. I live in a small town with a few neighbors I know by name or by dog. We share our life histories in cryptic snippets at the cluster of mailboxes. I listen to my dog sleep, the rise and fall of her breath swelling and shrinking her rib cage. Sometimes she dreams something worrisome and whimpers. Shake it off, I tell her. It's just a dream. Dreams are a weakness or a strength. You have to power through the pain, though it may have no name. I read poets living and dead who teach me music, truth, and complexity of meaning. I try to understand them, but usually catch just scraps of their precious thoughts. I take walks to the park and back, sometimes into the big woods up the mountain. My fellow creatures show me the way to grieve, to distract myself with their company. Like a magician's vanishing coin moving from hand to hand, poets can share and erase the edges of scars, wear down the emperor's head, the old patriarch. The trees beside me are cruelly indifferent in their green explosions. Robins pace the wet grass in a steady pattern of early worm. I am no longer young. No one asks me to undress for the camera. In museums, I remember the artist I used to be. I love gazing at the colors, at my husband's face. My parents live on the other side of now, and I seldom see them. Every other year, I visit my big sister in the great land I used to call home. I'm a child of the trees and mountains, berries, and the smell of cedar. When the temperatures rise, I itch to travel farther north. Owning my tribe. 1. Birds tag the boy's socks. He sheds to the floor the little glyphs of dirt, the size of his treads, and the traces of grass and mulch he drags in from outside. He can't be troubled. His task is to blend the inner and the outer, keep his foot in contact with solid ground as often as possible. He knows he is a conduit. 2. Midnight creeper, the man, scuffs his naked feet across bare floorboards to the cupboard of pills and cookies, sleep aids to counter the pain of cranky joints. Swish and sweep in near sleep, his being is massive. Ankles tethered to the center's iron core, his head in a swirl of distant galaxies. 3. Twice in a dream, a caution about the hair growing on the bottoms of my feet, a soft, dark bristle spreading like the pampas along the outer edges and creeping into the arch. What tribe beckons, wants to pull me in? Middle-Earth's dark tunnels and grottos are mapped along the back of my hands. I'm not afraid of my own kin. I'm resisting explaining anything, but feel free to ask me questions after. Only a matter of time. My husband's brother, Lee, says he's been sitting in the front pew since his older sister passed. The privilege makes him a little anxious. He stops time in his workshop, keeps the rabbits from lettuce, his grandchildren circling around him. Steve says he's in his last quarter. I dispute his math. But a sense of rounding a corner to the finish hangs in the air like a clothesline of socks that won't dry, or a vexing dream only golf or a golfing poem where we leave. My sister gardens above the glacier till the snow overtakes, mentoring the young folk like she does her yellow toms, her final score of 20 years reflecting as an after-dinner conversation on her sapphire blue couches. I'm too struck with the beginning myself to anticipate the final chapter, beginning to feel at home as if after a long time away, why would I think of leaving? I had the privilege of working with a man in his final year, suffering from dementia and having lived a very isolated life with some very unusual circumstances in his origins. His father was a Russian attaché to Japan, so he grew up in Japan, and then war. So everything that he knew was destroyed. Moving away from the river. The old man breaks to a sudden stop, breaks out of a long nap, which throws him towards the dashboard of his car, if his car were also his chair. He narrowly avoids a collision with someone else caught up in a daydream and sailing through the light. He'd rather be sleeping instead of waking to a lifetime of disturbing thoughts, bleeding into one another and culminating with the demon MacArthur. Demon thoughts he had successfully suppressed until now. So many disturbing thoughts, poking through the ground cover of his consciousness like the web of tenacious grasses in the garden, asserting themselves without his permission. He knew the world was going into a black hole, and he didn't want to go there, but here he is, flailing about in a sea of bad dreams that hound him, a niggling surf demanding his attention even when he is awake. A friend stops by and talks about nutria and mongoose, brings to mind the solitary black fox he'd seen once, which was very rare and filled him with awe. The same awe he revisits at the sight of a bald eagle in the snag across the river. He removes all the clutter and settles on only one photo to mount on the wall as a reminder of the years he was immersed in photography, the years he spent hiking in the wilderness of the Northwest, a blue and white view of the river where the fish still swim through the shattered net of his consciousness. He goes back to sleep with one eye open, wishing for the time to pass, wading into the deep waters of an uncharted river in spite of himself, and being drawn deeper and wondering, will I ever know peace? The view of the river with the flitting of juncos and jays, woodpeckers and blackpeckers can't hold him anymore, though he fought so hard to stay, to finish his days here precisely for this view. His illusions of peace are small comfort as he slides into sleep in the wingback facing away from the river. And one more really cheery poem before we get to something else. The morning after you pass, for Peter Sears. I wake to hear the clink of metal on china, not the dog's breakfast, dog tags jangling against her dish, because she's asleep at my feet, but my husband, gathering each floating berry and bit of crisp rice with the ting of his teaspoon against the porcelain bowl's surface. This irregular music does not compel me to rise, but I find I'm willing. Somber dresses me. Slowness takes my feet. Together we move as if through jello, while I listen for the sounds of a life without you in it. I don't want this next poem to seem too obtuse, so I will tell you, in an earlier part of my life, I was an artist and intensely involved in fine art lithography. She marks the page with a match after Vera Pavlova. In her life as a lithographer, she drew on stone and learned to banish the ghosts of her trade previous images drifting up through the porous lime like memories bleeding through time. She ground them in gradations of grit until with the finest she planed a surface smooth enough to cradle like eggshells, the fragile nuance, the articulation of her every line and breath. The images she laid down to pull from the stone as proof on paper are ghosts to her now, no less fierce than Blake's archangels and the beast of man, as if residual vapors of their breath could rupture the gum that once held them fast. Her memories hold no faster. Look there, where her veined hand lies across the page. A ghost bleeds through to now, bleeds to the deckled edge and the red folds of a cloak, the hair wild in the face of fire, the unbearable light of the divine cast off from her in every direction. She marks the page with a match. The crinkly sandwich of leaves and vellum, slammed together cover to cover, releases in a puff the stink of ink, a whiff of the printmaker's kerosene. In her dreams, a gallery of fire, red hair, red cloak, red sumac, and in an arctic field, the flaming tips of fireweed ignite the summer's end. We got time for this one. I know it's rather common now, but I'm one of those who gets to navigate the land of migraines, and that's what this poem is about. There's also a reference to some phrases in a child's book by Ludwig Bemelmans. Have any of you read the Madeline books? On employing Einstein's special relativity, with thanks to Ludwig Bemelmans. I feed the dog at 7 a.m. and think about climbing back under the covers because I missed an hour when I woke at 4. The deficit already a nagging along the right side of my neck and across the top of my head. In the bathroom mirror, my eyelid reveals an extra fold and deeper droop, right eye at half-mast. Head returned to pillow and both eyes closed again. I strive to regain the lassitude of pre-sleep, pull the covers tighter and tuck them under my hip, over my shoulder, and the flannel snug beneath my chin. The strains of the tune that was in my head before I popped up revisit, A Christmas Carol. Too late in the season, but I don't really care because I'm beginning to drift away from the body, away from the pain. My mind slows my departure. In the middle of the night, Miss Flavelle turned on the light and said, "Something is not right." Why did I wake at 4 a.m.? And what have I done to merit this discomfort? This is my routine, you see, to try to identify the migraine's trigger with an exhausting recounting, like a runaway train, of what I ate or watched or read or experienced that may have put me over the edge of this event horizon and into the shadow of a migraine storm. If it's not a prolonged standing on a cement floor or walking all day in uncomfortable shoes or milling about an overcrowded public event with Klieg lights overhead, think theater or box store, it's usually something I ate. For instance, it was probably the pizza. By using the stratagem, I am in control, though I'm also always to blame, which is a bit of a hammer to an already sore head. I relegate the ongoing train of my recounting to background noise. The threat will either gain momentum or fade away. At some point, I will rise to navigate the hallway, listening to one side or bumping into walls outright, in order to open the medicine drawer and finger the small tablet in the foil packet. I will tear it open expertly and swallow the pill, cradle my head in my arm on my pillow until the pain begins to subside. When I do get up, free of pain, my mind will feel flat. I will have no ambition, though a mild euphoria may visit me by late afternoon. For now, I will just sleep a little longer. I really did end up picking all the serious poems. This one I wrote after the Kavanaugh hearings, which gutted me, as they say. Falling out after the Kavanaugh hearings. When I fall out of the apple tree, the world slows. Like falling out of love, it's a gradual process. The step stool and body cant and sink, then the pillow thump of back and backside, coming to ground, head bouncing as an aftershock. I do not see the sky spin sideways, the ground rise up to meet me, though it does. I do not feel the old self fall away, the windfall of identity shattered. Oh, frailsome youth, this country mine. Now it is late and I find myself weeping, my body slightly altered. Pain is all around me, but it's not all mine. Sometimes things fall apart or fall open. I fall open like a book. You see the bruises flower in the margins. You feel the spine submit out of habit. And there is no going back. We cannot unlearn what is true. Last one. Nurturing a creative life. From the third floor, I see a woman run down the sidewalk away from the hospital, her bathrobe flapping like wings. 2 cops dash after her. Later, a scrub jay sits in our hay-colored grass with his back to me, his head tilted to one side as he sends his wings to kill off mites. A neighborhood cat approaches. You and I take the sofa bed, my husband the mat on the floor. Then he joins us as an afterthought. I move to the middle. You are slight as an elf, your narrow back wingless. When you hear the buzz of a wasp, you sit up to study, then lie down again. In the morning, something has eaten one corner of the mattress, something with big teeth. Thank you very much.